The Dutchman's utter dominance this year had made the fate of the tournament appear predetermined months before the summer break even arrived. He has broken one record for straight victories, and before the year's up, he'll probably shatter his own for the most victories in a season. Today, we're going to discuss the controversy of Verstappen and Sergio Perez. After a competitive beginning, Verstappen easily defeated his lone potential rival, Red Bull colleague Sergio Perez. There have been some notable moments when I look back on it. This season, there have only been 3 occasions when the Dutch anthem has not performed after a race. One of them ended up becoming a crucial turning point in the season that followed. It became apparent that Red Bull had something exceptional in its car after the F1 preseason. George Russell, a Mercedes driver, predicted following the year's first qualifying session that the defending world champions would triumph in every race. After 4 races, both Red Bull drivers had a 2-2 record, with Verstappen winning in Bahrain and Australia, and Perez winning in Saudi Arabia and Azerbaijan. Verstappen just escaped a collision with the wall after being forced wide by Russell in the latter race, which was held at Baku's well-known street track. Perez won the sprint race. Perez would go on to win the subsequent Grand Prix, but Verstappen's prospects of victory were hampered by the placement of a safety car. Verstappen was working on some season-defining work in the cockpit of his car while Perez was coasting home in first place. The Dutchman used the remaining stages of the race to experiment with various settings and modes, which he could do by using the several buttons on the steering wheel. He was essentially figuring out what worked and what didn't as he went along. Verstappen may have appeared to be struggling to control his car from the outside, but he was actually hard at work inside, perfecting his art. Verstappen saw that race in Baku as the pivotal moment in his season before this week's race in Qatar. It's not like I suddenly turned the car upside down, but little details can make a difference. I knew it would be difficult to pass when I fell behind following the pit stop with the safety car, of course. I was experimenting widely. It was a little bit of an up and down stint because some of them worked, he stated. I was experimenting with various setups on the car during the early part of the season to gain a better understanding because we hadn't fully mastered some aspects. As the race progressed, I started to feel more comfortable, found the right balance, and that allowed me to push a bit harder. Certain factors were starting to align, and I was in a good flow towards the end of the race. And also, at the beginning of the season, we were mainly driving on street circuits, which I think in general are a little bit less enjoyable. And then you get to tracks where you have a lot of fast corners, and it's just better to drive. After the race, I jumped out of the car, and of course, P2 is not where I want to be, but I was like, I actually learned a lot throughout the race. In actuality, doing it was quite useful, he continued. Verstappen's impromptu research paid off. The 10-race winning streak that began with the Miami Grand Prix in early May and ended with the Italian Grand Prix in early September followed in Baku. Because of the might of their equipment, a dominant driver may be so simple to write off. Verstappen's performance in Baku is a perfect illustration of how, even if having a fast car is essential to winning a championship, it's the little human aspects that may distinguish the exceptional from the average. For the 2 races on either side of August summer break, Verstappen saved 2 of his most impressive performances. Verstappen was in a separate league from the rest of the pitch in both his native Netherlands and Belgium, where he was born, and where there are often a lot of Dutch supporters. He started 6th on the grid in Belgium due to an engine penalty, but it made no difference. On lap 16, he made his way through the pack and took the race's lead from Perez. Verstappen qualified at Zandvoort, a track that will be back on the schedule in 2021 only as a result of his ascent to superstardom. Half a second faster than the next fastest car. He never displayed any signs of crumbling under strain during the race that was bookended by intense downpours, the second of which led to a disorganized series of laps. Verstappen maintained his characteristic lack of emotion in the face of the boisterous home crowd. The Verstappen who won the title in 2021 and the Verstappen who won it in 2023 are very different from one another. When competing against the Ferraris for the Italian Grand Prix victory in early September, 1 week after winning at Zandvoort, this was never more obvious. The win would mark the record-breaking 10th straight triumph. Verstappen acquired the moniker Mad Max early in his career because of his impatient and occasionally impulsive attitude behind the wheel. Former champions Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, and Kimi Raikkonen publicly criticized it since it occasionally worked and other times it didn't. Verstappen's tendency towards aggression would be seen personally by Hamilton in 2021, a year in which the cars collided numerous times. The fact that Verstappen was thrown off the track in the opening turn of the Imola race earlier in the season made Hamilton recognize that he had to fight fire with fire. That's not to imply that everything was his fault. Following were collisions in Silverstone and Monza, and later in the year, there would also be significant flashpoints in Saudi Arabia and Brazil. Verstappen hasn't demonstrated any of that this year. Cynics would argue that he didn't need to drive that way to win, but there were many occasions when he could have done so, even though it wasn't necessary. Verstappen started the Monza race sandwiched between Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. When Verstappen did attack, Sainz defended admirably, but as the conflict progressed, it became obvious that he was waiting for his chance. It was simple to picture the younger Verstappen squaring off against Sainz and realizing it was now or never. Similar circumstances led to him losing a victory at the 2018 Chinese Grand Prix. Verstappen understood taking his time was the best course of action, and when the opportunity presented itself, he easily passed using the drag reduction system, or DRS, to take the victory. Numerous things were revealed by that victory's patience. A driver who is utterly confident in both himself and his vehicle, for starters, and who is aware that he can let the race come to him. Although it is difficult to envision Verstappen ever repeating Niki Lauda's famous adage, "The secret is to win by going as slow as possible." He has undoubtedly developed into a driver who knows which fights to pick and which ones to avoid. Verstappen still has an aggressive streak, which is undeniably one of his distinguishing characteristics, but he now seems to understand when to reserve it. In Singapore, where Verstappen finished 6th, Carlos Sainz and Ferrari interrupted Red Bull's undefeated season. Red Bull downplayed the significance of finishing a perfect season, but it was obvious that Verstappen was wounded by the defeat and the conversation that followed. Verstappen would compete in panel matches against Red Bull CEO Christian Horner in the days between Singapore and Japan. He was properly fired up, Horner later said of their encounter. He made it clear that he said he wanted to win the race in Japan by 20 seconds. Verstappen narrowly missed accomplishing it, winning by a tiny fraction of a second less than the goal he set for himself. A second perfect qualifying lap served as the foundation for that triumph. Verstappen's onslaught over the first few turns of Suzuka's renowned circuit was magnificent, surpassing Monaco's sublime performance in the final sector. The footage of the lap that F1 uploaded to their YouTube channel is breathtaking to see. According to Horner, "What we've seen today is something very special," he told Sky Sports. It was challenging to object. Verstappen would use one of the greatest F1 soundbites to react to rumors that a technical instruction about flexing bodywork had hindered his team in Singapore after his amazing qualifying performance. Anyone who believed that there was a clear connection to Red Bull's poor performance 1 week before received a verbal rebuke. Verstappen's victory might have appeared easy when looking at the results, but it was evident just how determined he was from the race's start as he fended off the McLaren duo of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, securing the lead into Turn 1. That's all about today's video. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, press the bell icon to get notified of our upcoming videos. Let us know your opinion in the comments section below.